talking billions of taxpayer dollars spent on housing these people. And they're not just coming over here for a better life. They're unassimilated. When you say you are a citizen, you can now stay here. We support you. Who do you think they're gonna vote for? The party that does that for them. They've done the same thing to black people in this country. They manipulated the black vote by giving them handouts and different things like that, and now they secured the black vote. That's why black people vote unanimously for Democrats, even though Democrats have done nothing for black people in this country. There is no difference between an American that is black and an American that is white because we both believe in American values. What happens is when you start getting people into this country that do not make a vow to assimilate to American values and our Constitution and our way of life, that's where the problem happens. Like and subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you get notification anytime I go live and make a video, and make sure if you want to message me or send me any of the information that you want me to know, whether it's questions or not, send it to me at brandon@freedomchat.com. Let's get into this.
Cenk Uygur, in America, it's been very interesting watching what's happened under the Trump administration. So the big tick in the box that most people can, I think, sign up to with approval is he's pretty well shut the southern border down to illegal immigrants coming in. From various reports, it is estimated that as many as 10 million, maybe more, came over that border in the 4 years under Joe Biden. We don't know the exact number, but broadly speaking, most Americans I've talked to approve of that, of Trump stopping that happening. They also approve of people who are in the country undocumented. If they commit a crime unconnected to their status, to their immigration status, then they should be deported. Most Americans agree with that. The flashpoint in America has been the extra step through these ICE agents going around places like Los Angeles, picking up undocumented people, seemingly often on a whim or a suspicion, and those people being removed from the country, even if in some cases they've built a family there, they've had kids there, they contribute to society, they're paying taxes and so on. So I think there's been some big wins for Trump on this issue of illegal immigration in America, comparative to his previous administration under Biden, but also this contentious point as to whether if you're in a country illegally, whatever life you built for yourself, however long you've been there, the state should still have the right to just pick you up and throw you out.
Yeah, first of all, you're all racist, and I cancel all of you. Okay, so no, nobody's talking about that anymore. Okay.
Let me tell you something. I believe with all of my heart that every life has value. That's why I proudly stand with Save the Storks. They don't just talk about being pro-life, they live it. They are Life Army, meeting women where they are and showing compassion, truth, and hope before it's too late. Right now, there are 108 mobile medical units or stork buses across the country reaching women before they make a devastating choice or attempt their own abortion. These buses offer ultrasounds, counseling, and real support, giving moms the chance to choose life. But the mission needs you too. We're raising $500,000 to build and place multiple stork buses in Charlie's honor, and each one will be named after Erica Kirk as they travel across the country fighting for life. We need everybody to give generously and to stand up and to be part of something bigger than themselves. And for every gift of $50 or more, you will receive this free Life Army t-shirt. Join me in the Life Army. Together, we can help more moms, save more babies, and change more futures. So go to SaveTheStorks.com/Tatum or scan the QR code on the screen now to donate.
Listen, there's two different issues on immigration in America. First is, are we allowing too many immigrants in? So let me give you some context on that. For the first time since the 1960s, the number of foreign-born people in America has gone down by 1 million people. And by the way, you can say, hey, the American people kind of like that. That's why they like that Trump, stopped people coming in from the border. And that's a fair point, right? But are we in some sort of immigrant emergency here in America? No, the number of immigrants are going down, not up. And further context, so about 15% of Americans are foreign-born. If that seems like a high number to you, it's much higher in other countries, 22% in Canada, 29% in Switzerland, 30% in Australia. So we don't have some sort of immigration emergency in that sense here. So that context is super important. Nevertheless, I understand that people are wary of change, and sometimes change doesn't bring positive things, right? Or it might bring a lot of positive stuff, but has some negative consequences. So we have to make rational decisions here. Part of the problem, Piers, is that it leads to the second issue, which is that people want you to look at immigrants and say that's the real problem. And the reason they're doing that is because they don't want you to look up. So the guy coming in across the border in America, just across the Rio Grande, doesn't have any money, doesn't have any power. He didn't rig the system against you. The donor class in America did. And they desperately don't want you to know that, so they want you to get angry at immigrants instead. So I think the number one source of discontent here in the U.S., and I would bet that it's the same in the U.K., is not the raw numbers. It's that we feel that our government isn't delivering for us. So, the right wing says America first. These days on the Young Turks, we say Americans first. It's because we never get anything. And you see, it's not like these immigrants that are, for example, in Chicago, where people were complaining about it, including, by the way, black and brown communities in Chicago, right? And they were getting a certain stipend. And the stipend's not huge or anything, but as a resident of Chicago, they were looking at that and thinking, I'm not getting anything. And now all of a sudden, these guys are getting something. It's not much, but it's something. So why do I never get anything? And the real answer to that, of course, has nothing to do with immigrants. It has to do with the richest people in the country and mainly corporate rule that has decided that they're going to extract all of our wealth in the form of $35 billion in oil subsidies, endless wars that enrich the defense contractors, and by the way, create waves of new immigrants as unrest in those countries occur. So if you really want to fix these problems, you have to look at the donors and the people in power, the people setting the rules, rather than just hating on new immigrants that came in.
Officer Tatum, one of the big flashpoints in the UK, as I mentioned, these small boats just coming in all the time on the southern border with illegal immigrants pouring in. And then once they get there, the government in the UK feeling obliged to house them, and they're putting them up often in rather nice hotels. And the flashpoint there is, why are these asylum seekers, many of them, they all claim to be, but they're not all legitimate asylum seekers. For example, a year and a half ago, they discovered 15,000 of the year total number who come in on the small boats actually turned out to be young, economic, male Albanians from Albania, which is not a war-torn country. So they weren't genuine asylum seekers. They were economic migrants seeking a better life for themselves. Nothing wrong with that, but they needed a proper process of going through the legal way of getting in. So there's a lot of anger that's been building up by people living through a cost of living crisis, can't afford to feed their kids, real problem with public services as the UK population continues to rise, 50 million back in the 50s, nearly 70 million now, crumbling health service because it can't cope with the extra volume of people, education, all the public services creaking at the seams. And then they have this constant flashpoint of these people coming in illegally and seemingly, in many cases, being treated better than people already in the country who are there perfectly legally. That's been causing a lot of the anger, which is now erupting in places around the country.
Yeah, it's the same thing that's happening in the United States of America. It's a lot to unpack here. The government is a fraudulent organization when it comes to this illegal immigration stuff, and most of it is from the Democrat Party. They legitimately, or I wasn't legitimate, but they literally opened up the border and allowed every illegal person that they can possibly find to allow them to come into our country, to flood our cities so they can win elections forever. This is exactly what they did. They don't give a flying flip.
And explain, Officer Tatum, just explain why that would help the Democrats win elections.
Well, when you get an influx of people into certain areas and then you give them amnesty, which is the ultimate plan, now you have more electoral college votes. Now you have more Congress representation. All of those things they can leverage. Now,
why would you assume they don't want to vote Democrat, though?
Well, let me explain. If you get a bunch of people who have no hope from the country that they came from, and they're believing they come to America, which is utopia, they get all this free stuff, they get all the government funding, and then when you give them amnesty, when you say you are a citizen, you can now stay here. We support you. Who do you think they're going to vote for? The party that does that for them. They've done the same thing to black people in this country. They manipulated the black vote by giving them handouts and different things like that, and now they secured the black vote. That's why black people vote unanimously for Democrats, even though Democrats have done nothing for black people in this country. They plan to do the same thing for illegal aliens. They're losing some of the minority votes, so now they have a new demographic. And also, they don't give a F about these people coming over here. Because if they did, they would shut the border down and have them come through a legal process, because people are getting raped, children are getting sex trafficked. These people, the cartel, are making money. Coyotes are escorting these people through the desert and leaving them to die. So it's a shame that our government is doing this. And it's not just a minor inconvenience for the American people. We're talking billions of taxpayer dollars spent on housing these people. And they're not just coming over here for a better life. They're unassimilated. They do not want to be a part of America. They want to do their own thing. Their culture is very different than American culture. They're raping people and doing a lot of other things. Now, let me clarify this because I don't want people to take it out of context. It's not every illegal alien that's doing this, but it is enough to be an issue. And we shouldn't even have an issue with this, because if you came here illegally, you shouldn't be here in the first place. I don't care if your grandma, nana, whoever it is, built a life here. You built it on illegal terms. That's like me breaking in your house, Piers, and I'm living there, and all of a sudden I start cooking in your house, and I have a kid, and now my kid live in your house. Somehow I'm afforded all of the amenities that you've built. No, that don't work like that. You got to go home. You got to get out of here. You should have never been here in the first place.
Highlighted there. Obviously, they're not all criminals. For all we know, none of them might be criminally minded. But it wouldn't take much in terms of one or two of those people in there to commit some heinous crime in Crowborough for that to become a real powder keg. And then people would attack the people of Crowborough. And I'd be like, well, hang on. Just hang on a second. You know, this was inflicted on them as a society. And if it blows up in their face in an ugly way, it's going to cause a lot of unrest.
Yeah. So let me address both sides of that. So first of all, for the folks who are worried about race and all that, and is it anti-immigrant mentality is by definition racist? No, because I can give you examples from other countries again. And for example, in Turkey, they took in a ton of Syrian immigrants and Afghan immigrants because of the wars there. And a lot of the native Turks were pissed. They didn't want it either, right?
Well,
so,
Germany. I mean, in Germany, it cost Angela Merkel her job. She let 1 million in, mainly from Syria, and ultimately that was one of the main reasons she got kicked out.
And look, it's a natural thing that happens. That number one, people are used to their way of life, and when things change a little bit, they get discomforted by it. So I understand it. It's a natural reaction. And at the same time, especially when your government doesn't deliver for you, as is happening in both Turkey and the UK and America, people get frustrated and go, why doesn't anybody, our government, ever represent us? And now we've got these new folks in, and they might be getting a nickel and a dime, but it's a nickel and a dime more than I'm getting. So that's why that frustration happens, and I understand. And I'm an immigrant, and what I would say to the immigrant community is, and most of us are overwhelmingly grateful, right? And so look, for example, we talk about all the Eastern Europeans that came in the biggest wave of immigration to the UK. My guess is that Constantine's family came from Eastern Europe at some point into the UK, right? But Constantine's grateful, from what I've seen. I'm grateful for America, right? And I would tell those immigrants, especially in the UK where they're, for some magical reason, not allowed to work for a year, go to the local church, go to the local community and volunteer. Say, how can we help, right? And get to know people and get them to know you so that people are less alarmed, right? Now, at the same time, I want to say to the folks who are non-immigrants, don't do the demagoguing, right? So on crime, for example, here in America, unfortunately, natural-born citizens are twice as likely to commit crime as undocumented immigrants and 4 times more likely to commit crime than legal immigrants like myself and my family, right? So that doesn't mean that natural-born Americans are somehow worse. It's just these are all different geopolitical, social, and cultural contexts that leads to those numbers. But are immigrants in the U.S. more likely to do crime? No, they're actually less likely to do crime. So let's be honest about that, and let's be clear about that, so we don't need to demagogue over that. And then in terms of what Tatum said earlier, look, there is no amnesty here. There is no plan for amnesty. If there was a plan for amnesty, why didn't Obama do it? Why didn't Biden do it? The last time we had amnesty was actually under Ronald Reagan. Right. No, they didn't, actually, brother. And so,
the DACA
and right now,
was
the mass deportations, no. And they don't vote. There's all these demagoguing about, oh my God, they're all going to vote. They're all coming. No, they don't have citizenship and they can't vote. So look, last thing on this is in terms of how it's going so far in America, you were right in your beginning, Piers. No question that people like the closing of the border and they like kicking out the criminals who are undocumented. And that's super rational. Now almost no one on the left objects to that, right? So the part where we begin to disagree is the mass deportations. Right. Not begin, we definitely disagree. And by the way, their independents are on our side saying, don't do the mass deportations. They're ugly. They're not the right way to go. As we see with so many immigrants in other countries, as I said before, Canada, Switzerland, et cetera, it isn't the number of immigrants you have, it's the system you have. Do you have the right system? Do you assimilate them well? Do they assimilate well? Are they contributing to this society? So while Syrians might be a problem in some perceived ways because of the crowding issues and the economic issues in Germany and in Turkey, Steve Jobs' dad was a Muslim Syrian immigrant. And it led to Steve Jobs, which led to Apple. Elon Musk is an immigrant. So obviously immigrants can make massive, massive contributions. And that is why America is the #1 country in the world, because we're the most open to immigrants.
I mean, obviously, Tatum. Let me just repeat my favourite comment at this stage of these debates, which is that the biggest deporter in American presidential history per year that he was in office was Barack Obama, who deported over 3 million people in 8 years. He was known as deporter-in-chief in Mexico. He was the biggest mass deporter of them all. The only difference is the liberal world didn't care. If I asked any of my liberal friends in the last few years how many people did Obama deport, they had no idea. It never crossed their mind he might be a mass deporter. Everybody in Mexico knew how many he was deporting because it was on an industrial scale. So there's been a lot of hypocrisy politically about this. And I would say in the UK that the cross-party reality is they've all cocked this up, all of them. None of them have worked out how to stop 60,000 or so people coming over illegally on the small boats. They've tried everything from threatening to send them to Rwanda to all sorts of different ploys. None of them have worked. We've now got this gigantic backlog, which is ridiculous. Obviously, a lot of the people claiming asylum are not actually asylum seekers. We know that. Most of them are young male economic migrants trying it on. But, as Officer Tatum, Ronald Reagan said so rightly, if you don't have a border, you don't have a country. That's the whole point of a border is to protect your border so you are a country. And I do think one of the issues we haven't really touched on, but if you look at Europe, for example, in the last decade, because of various wars led by Syria and others, the number of people that have come across the European continent has been, I think, 7-8 million was the last number I read in just a few years. It's an enormous number of people. You've not really seen this since the end of the Second World War. And that has, and this is the other part of the debate I think we should just touch on, that has a real-time sea change effect on the social fabric of a country, right? So if you look at someone like the UK, for example, if you look at the demographic of what we were like back in the start of last century, predominantly white Christian country, vast majority of people. Now it's a far less white country by comparison. It's a far less Christian country. A lot of that down to actually people not having any religious beliefs, but also we have a lot of Muslims in the UK, 4 million, about the same as they have in America. In America, you have about the same number of Jews, for example. In the UK, we have just 250,000 Jews, which is why I think there's been more of a flashpoint between the Muslim community and the Jewish community, because the Muslim community outnumbers the Jewish community many, many times comparative to America. Now, the point of saying this is just that these are statistical facts. And I was having a debate with Tucker Carlson, which is going on his show later today, in which we were talking about it. He thinks this is a really bad thing. I was defending it, saying the UK in particular, like America, has always been an extraordinary melting pot of cultures and faiths and skin colours and everything else. And I like that. You know, I live in a high street in West London. I walk down pretty much every store, every service place, every hotel, every restaurant has a multicultural staff. I like it. Right? I've got no problem with it. But are we creating a problem in 20 years' time if we carry on down this route? Does it matter? You know, do you stop being England, for example? It's just what Tucker Carlson was arguing. I argue strenuously, no, we don't. But there's no doubt the country will look very different in 50 years' time to what it did 50 years ago.
Yeah, Piers, I think there's a big difference, and we got to delineate between the two. There's a difference between immigration and illegal immigration. You know, the people that are coming out to our country illegally are committing a crime. If you come into our country and you sneak past the port of entry and you go up under a fence, you committed a crime. You should be prosecuted for that crime. The fact that we let it go on so long is the reason why it's been exacerbated. And if a person comes into this country and they seek asylum and they lied or they didn't show up to court, they should be deported. That's according to the law that we have on the books. And let's go beyond that. I do push back on this idea that because America is less white, somehow it's going to be less American. America is not a race; it's an idea. So the people that come over here,
that's what I believe. Just to be clear,
but
Tucker Carlson and people like him, they get very nationalistic about this, right? And they say that that culturally, if you invite too many people from other cultures into your country, that you lose your own identity and culture as a country. What do you say to that argument?
Well, Piers, I think that same people understand that it's not about color, it's about assimilation. There is no difference between an American that is black and an American that is white because we both believe in American values. What happens is when you start getting people into this country that do not make a vow to assimilate to American values and our Constitution and our way of life, that's where the problem happens. And unfortunately, one of the closest countries to us is Mexico and South America. And so a lot of people are coming over that just so happen to be of that demographic, and they're not abiding by the American values, and that's why you see a color change. But if everybody that we allow to come over here, like many immigrants that have come over here and that have contributed tremendously to the success of America, Elon Musk being one of them and a lot of others, because they do what? Assimilate. They believe in American values. They believe in the capitalism. They're not coming over here to be socialists and communists. They're not coming over here to weaponize empathy to try to create the world to be a new way of life. Like we see these mind-dead congressmen or congresswomen that have literally said that they want to rewrite American values. They want to get rid of the Constitution. I mean, these things are an apparel or are negative to the American
the Constitution.
The
Constitution. It's interesting as we approach Thanksgiving, but the Constitution. I think there's often a misunderstanding about it. It's not some sacrosanct, untouchable document. There are 27 amendments to the Constitution. It's been amended many times. There's no reason. In fact, the Founding Fathers made it crystal clear it was a document for the people, right? And they implied there should be natural evolution, that the people of the moment should determine the way the country is run. And I do feel sometimes that some Americans get very strict about the absolute tiny wording of the Constitution to explain and justify whatever it is they want to do. Without any sense it can ever evolve. I mean, all documents like that should be living documents, shouldn't they?
Piers, that could be true, but we have never gotten rid of the Constitution. We've made amendments to the Constitution. Yes. That means we've improved upon.
That's what I mean.
We don't get rid of it, and I think it's right. Of course, the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment were all valuable amendments, right? To eliminate slavery, to get and actually for the citizenship of black people. It wasn't the anchor baby stuff that they're doing today. It was actually the citizenship of black people and the right for black people to vote. So the amendments, as we grow and evolve as a nation, and you know what I'm saying, we fulfill the promises that our founding fathers had in their intent with the document, is something that I support. But to say we need to rewrite the whole thing,
I don't mean that. I don't mean that. I do think there's a good argument.
People in our country that feel that way.